Steelers fans, it's a rough start at 1-2 for your team, but we're going to talk about things that we are looking at moving forward. Does this team need to hit a panic button, or are there things that are tangible they can actually do to improve? I'm Chris Carter, host of the North Shore Drive podcast. Joining me today is Brian Batko. We're of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we're getting you ready for the weekend, looking back at what happened in the Browns loss, but also forward in what could happen in the coming weeks. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
And welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube, anywhere podcasts are hosted for free. Subscribe to all of those different networks, especially to this YouTube channel, to get all of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's video content right here available to you at any point in time. Today's episode is brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage, the power to project one of our Post-Gazette Steelers beat writers into your home or office. Using augmented reality, you can get an exclusive pregame breakdown from a Steelers expert standing right in your living room. Get the latest insights on starting lineups, key matchups, and critical stats at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage. No apps or downloads, just insider access to Steelers updates at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage, and get a real edge on this week's action. And if you did that this week, you saw this man in your living room.
I'm not even in my own living room right now, Chris. I'm outside on the deck. It's hoodie season, first day of fall. I mean, I got the beanie on, you know,
with the Wu-Tang hoodie, bro. Like Wu-Tang is behind me.
The Wu-Tang hoodie, just getting real grimy with it after the Browns got kind of grimy with it with the Steelers last night in Cleveland.
They did, and that's a good way to segue into this. There's a lot of things to point at for this last loss. You could point at the run defense just getting bullied all across the place. You could point at the Steelers offense having some moments early on and then just disappearing in the second half. And it really looked like the Browns were just a better team in this game. There was no question about that. But there is the question now. You're 1-2, and I think everyone's looking at those looming next 4 or 5 games. You got the Jets next week at home with a long week off, sure. But then you've got the Buccaneers. Then you've got the Bills. You've got the Eagles. You've got the Dolphins. All 4 of those teams, I believe, are 2-0 and are looking very good right now. And so everyone's thinking, well, if they don't beat the Jets, they may be 1-7 going into the bye, which is unheard of in the Mike Tomlin era of the Steelers. But is this a time that you think that there's a panic button that needs to be pressed with a big shakeup? Because everyone wants to say, well, you know, look at the quarterback, look at the offensive coordinator, look at the overall coaching, that the direction of the team is on the right point. I look at these losses and I see like, man, like it's not good that they lost these games, but the structure of what they are trying to do, I don't think is the problem in these losses.
Yeah, I guess this is me getting real nihilistic on you for a second here, but like This is the NFL that we're talking about here. And, you know, some people were chattering in the press box before the game, you know, whoever loses this one between the Browns and Steelers, their season's off the rails. I'm like, really? I mean, yeah, I know they both have a tough schedule. Right. Everybody does in the AFC North this year, given the divisional matchups, but like weird stuff happens every week in this league. So yeah, I mean, you don't like your chances against the Bucs or against the Bills. And yet, I mean, a play here or a play there and everything's different. So I'm not hitting the panic button personally. You know, it hasn't been good these last couple games, especially the defense has gone from, really, really impressive against the Bengals. And it's slowly getting worse with each outing. That's not ideal, but the offensive, they did some better things in the first half last night. Second half, they barely had any possessions, really. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty much a lesson in how to not play complementary football with both sides of the ball, considering the defense was giving up long drives, not getting the ball back to the offense. When they did, the offense couldn't do anything with it, so they're putting the defense right back out there when they're probably sucking wind. So it wasn't a good performance by the Steelers by any means, but I'm not ready to can the OC, to switch quarterbacks just yet. Although, as I said in my chat on Monday on the Post-Gazette site, Chris, you are talking to a guy right now who, my wife, I've been with her for almost 15 years. And in college, I never switched roommates all 4 years. So I'm a pretty content person, and I'm not real fickle. Some people, though, would say, I'm afraid of change, but I guess that's pretty much what we're discussing here when it comes to the Steelers.
Afraid of change. So that means you are living in your fears, Brian Batko. But anyways, no, I'm
just a simple man. So and a patient man, I guess.
Oh man, this is great. But let's look at that non-complimentary football, because you're absolutely right. The Steelers offense does get 2 touchdowns in the second quarter, right around the time the defense gave up 2 touchdowns, and that was kind of what kept them alive. But in the second half, you come out, you have the first drive, like, okay, it got derailed because of a penalty. They had 10 plays, they gave themselves some times, but then they had 3 straight 3-and-outs, and that to me was when they needed to at least get their defense some time to rest, to recover, and that led to the 10 points. And the Steelers, they lost this game by 12 officially, but they lost this. It was really by a single possession. Just they threw those passes, the lateral play at the end where the Browns recovered to get the 6 points on top of that. But I look at that and I'm like, man, like that was the time to have a drive. Because even if the drive was another 10 plays, push them back to their side of their field and punt them and pin them deep, that would have at least given the Steelers time to recover and maybe hold off that last touchdown drive. But I look at this and I see, like, every time you look at this offense, you could blame several things. You could blame the offensive line for not run blocking too well. You can blame Mitch Trubisky for just not seeing the field. You could blame, a receiver, Deontay Johnson, because has a great ball for Mitch Trubisky down the sidelines in a big game situation, and it goes right through his hands. And it's just, each time you could point at different things. And I think that's where the Steelers offense is at, is that there's talent there, there's potential there, but there's no consistency.
You're right. I mean, we could go on and talk ourselves in circles about the big picture stuff. And we pretty much did that in the 3 days leading up to this game. If anyone has consumed, hopefully you're consuming this podcast religiously, but if you've listened to any other podcasts or radio shows or read what we've been writing, I mean, that's been the whole discussion. I mean, I had in our Skinny Post newsletter Thursday morning, there's like 20 some former Steelers weighed in on the Matt Canada or Mitch Trubisky conundrum this week. So we could do that until we're blue in the face. But a lot of what went wrong last night, Chris, as you just mentioned, were pretty granular things. A shovel pass to Jaylen Warren that was, maybe the most efficient play all night for the offense, just given, it was a throw short, run long situation. And Chuks Okorafor is illegally downfield, wipes it all out, kills that drive essentially. The catch, I don't necessarily know if I want to call it a drop by Deontay Johnson down the left sideline, but probably Mitch Trubisky's best throw of the night, maybe of his Steelers career thus far. I mean, he drops it right in the bucket, right? And Deontay can't come down with it. So, like, these are things that are one single line on the play-by-play sheet, if you're going back through the game, that really could have changed it. So maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I thought, if you do want to get into the philosophical things, I thought Canada came in with a pretty decent plan. They're rolling right, sprinting Mitch Trubisky out a lot, getting him away from Myles Garrett, making Dan Moore's job easy. And I thought Dan Moore did a pretty good job with that. So, I thought the intent for everything was sound. And as Trubisky kept saying after the game, he obviously didn't want to blame his receiver specifically. You never want to do that if you're a QB, but he just kept saying, we had some plays, we didn't make them. We'll go to the film and see how we can do it better. To me, I just translated that as, guys, what do you want me to do? I was putting the ball there. Guys weren't necessarily helping me out. Chase Claypool even said after the game, he didn't think Mitch threw one single inaccurate pass last night. Now, that's probably an over-exaggeration because the end of the first half didn't go very smoothly, but there were some communication errors there as well. Guys not getting on the same page. And even that, Chris, is the last thing I'll say on this subject. That end of first half drive, as Mitch Trubisky kept pointing out, would have been nice to have more than one timeout. They took 2 on defense.
I agree.
When they couldn't get situated with 12 men on the field, Tyson Alualu was running around like a chicken with his head cut off. So, again, not exactly helping each other out and coming together as one. That's going to lose you a lot of games in this league.
It certainly is, but we got to talk about more about the that conundrum you talked about. Trubisky, Pickett, Canada, and the talk. Mike Tomlin specifically addressed that after the game. We'll talk about that, the run defense, and a lot more right here in the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Liquid Death. If you see your coworkers cracking open a can in your 9 a.m. meeting, it's not a beer. It's probably just the new Mountain Spring water brand called Liquid Death. After establishing there's this crazy new water brand out there called Liquid Death that looks just like beer, we could tell you it's all about this Liquid Death brand. And what is it? Why is it called Liquid Death? Well, it's here to brutally murder your thirst while also murdering plastic pollution on the planet. Everyone knows that plastic bottles are becoming a problem and not helping the environment. So here is what Liquid Death is here to do. And two birds, one stone: murder your thirst, murder pollution. They also donate 10% of the profits from every can sold to help kill plastic pollution on the planet. We all know how harmful plastic can be to the environment and how good water is for you. So why not help yourself? Well, help out both with a tall can of Liquid Death. Go get Liquid Death at the local Target, 7-Eleven, or County Fair, or find Liquid Death retailer near you from their store located at liquiddeath.com/shore. That's liquiddeath.com/shore. We're also brought to you by MyBookie. Now, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Mac Jones, Lamar Jackson, there's a lot of big guns, young and old, that are throwing down this weekend, and nothing makes these matchups even more exciting than having some skin in the game at MyBookie. MyBookie has super contests, survivor pools, and a double deposit bonus that gives you everything you need to secure the bag. Getting started is simple. Sign up today and use your promo code NSD, that's the NSD for North Shore Drive, and you'll double your first deposit instantly. That's promo code NSD to double up your deposit up to $1,000 with MyBookie. This isn't your grandfather's bookie. This is MyBookie. Put your money where your mouth is and get rewarded for it. Begin your winning season today exclusively at MyBookie. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I'm Chris Carter. He's Brian Batko. We're talking more about your Pittsburgh Steelers after the Thursday night football loss, 29-17 to the Cleveland Browns. But after the game, Mike Tomlin directly asked, "Is Kenny Pickett coming?" Definitely no. Like he shuts it down in any way, shape, or form. And there's some that are saying that this is hubris on Tomlin's part. He doesn't want to be wrong with Mitch Trubisky. I'm not sure if that's it though, Brian. I get more of a sense like this is just, he feels like the veteran needs to kind of handle this situation. What's your read? Is this the Steelers trying to prove a point? Is this them protecting Kenny Pickett? What do you see as the reasoning behind this right now, even though Mitch Trubisky has struggled?
I don't think they're trying to prove a point. I think, more than anything, we can all stipulate that Mike Tomlin wants to win football games. So I don't think he's going to do much, if anything, that is going to stand in the way or hamper him from doing that. Now, I do think it is a consideration whether your rookie first-round pick, whether you feel he's completely ready just yet, or if it could help him continue to see this from the sideline, develop in practice, get a firsthand look at the speed of the game, and be out of the microscope. Right now he's still the guy that doesn't have the pressure on him. He's still the most popular guy in town. That's good for his confidence. I have to assume when they brought in Mitch Trubisky, maybe he made it clear to them, like, look, I've been through this. I was in Chicago where I was under fire every single week and heard everything you could possibly hear a fan base do and say about their starting quarterback. I was the number 2 overall pick. So this is, I'm kind of built for this. So I think Trubisky he's going to get another crack at this thing. I thought last night was his best game so far with the Steelers.
I'd agree with that.
I don't think it would be a great look right now for the head coach to bench a guy after the way he played last night. Not saying you lose the locker room or anything like that. That's not what I'm getting at, but I just don't think that is, the path that Mike Tomlin wants to go down right now. And again, I guess I'll just keep saying this. They lost by a touchdown. They did not get blown. They did not get their doors blown off. Mm-hmm. They stunk in the second half offensively. They only mustered 3 points, but there's a lot that goes into that when you talk about the flow of the game, how things were playing out, what the defense was and wasn't doing to help them. So I don't think Mitch Trubisky was the story of that game, Chris. I mean, in a sense, he always is. I get that, but I don't think he was the biggest issue or reason for that loss.
I look at that and like he's a reason, but you're right. This was a team loss. Again, the run defense not being there, and like you said, Malik Reed not looking great. Like out there, there's a lot of struggles that we can see that we can see on both sides of the ball there. And another thing that I think is a very I don't think that this doesn't play a factor into this decision of Kenny Pickett. Their next 5 games, the New York Jets at home, that's fine. But you have the next 4 games after that, 3 or 4 of them are on the road. You're on the road against the Bills. You're at home against the Buccaneers. You're on the road against the Dolphins and the Eagles. Those aren't exactly friendly situations for Kenny Pickett to get his first starts and get built up on. I do think that the Steelers want to make sure that he keeps progressing in the way that in a comfortable way, getting a good place to springboard off of. Maybe that's after the bye week. Maybe that's at the end of the season. Maybe it's next season. But I'm not so sure. Like this week is a long week. Sure, the Jets would be I think could be a matchup that Kenny Pickett could have a good start with. But right after that, you'd be asking him to go up against several really good opponents, and I do think that plays a factor into it. But like you were alluding to about the stuff that we've seen in the locker room and the global talk that we were talking about in the first segment. We have overreaction Monday. It's overreaction Friday in Pittsburgh after a loss.
It really does feel like a Monday now that you say that.
It does, right?
It's Friday. I'm pumped now. Let's go.
That's right. We feel like Monday, but it's actually Friday. There's no better way to handle that situation.
Yes.
But like you look around and there's a lot of talk about like abandon this, abandon that, and like I understand the call for Kenny Pickett. There's excitement to see what the young first round pick could do. But like, people saying that this defense is terrible and this is that and terrible. I mean, I looked at this defense. They weren't good in this game. I mean, they held the offense, the Browns in check for long enough that if the Steelers offense did something in the second half, they might win this game. And they kept the Patriots in check for long enough to give the Steelers an offense to make an impact on that game. But this team was built on being able for the defense to dominate the game. And they haven't been able to dominate a game without TJ Watt. And I think there's an obvious reason for that. But also, I'll say this clearly. When I was watching, both the second half of the Patriots game and the entire Browns game, that defense looked tired. They were, Miles Jack, who was exploding to the ball all against the Bengals and exploding to the ball in the first half against the Patriots. He's been a step slower. Cam Hayward's even gotten pushed back a lot more than we've seen. I do wonder how much of this is because the Steelers defense has been on the field more snaps than any other unit in football. And that was for back-to-back weeks. And then they had a Thursday night week to come off of that.
Yeah, 240 snaps through 3 games for the defense. I wasn't a math major, but that's 80 snaps a game. So that's tough sledding right there. And, you know that you've got a Browns offense that is going to try to impose their will. I don't want to be, Mr. Make Excuses guy, but sometimes excuses are just reasons. And the Browns get paid too. Yeah. I know fans don't really like to hear that line from players, but it is true. There's a reason why they run the ball so effectively, and they do this against most people. Ironically, they didn't do it last year in 2 games against the Steelers when the Steelers had the worst rushing defense in the league. So eventually, what is it? Law of averages, regression, whatever you want to call it. This time, Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, those guys were able to blow the Steelers off the ball. You'd love to see that more from the Steelers O-line. That's just not their identity right now. That's not who they are. So you've got to scheme some things around that. So, getting back to the quarterbacks, I thought Mitch Trubisky was pretty bad in week 2. I would say that maybe he was the biggest reason they lost that game against the Patriots. That's not where I'm at in the week 3 loss to the Browns. It was kind of just a full scale letdown in a lot of ways. And you drill down a little bit. I mean, I think the stat was Nick Chubb had 63 of his yards off the right side, off right tackle. That's usually where TJ Watt's going to be setting the edge. The D line, they're deep and they're experienced, but it's tough going against that Browns team that they know what they want to do. Jacoby Brissette converting 3rd downs. I mean, he's a skyscraper when he goes in on the quarterback sneak and yardage. So that right there is difficult to punch back against too. So Terrell Edmonds, another guy who did not bathe himself in glory last night. 2 one-on-one matchups. The Browns targeted him both times, scored both times with Amari Cooper and David Njoku there in the red zone close to the goal line. That sometimes you just have to make a play when you're in the secondary and you're only as strong as your weakest link. And Amari Cooper was making guys look silly, turning them around, whether it was Akello Witherspoon or Cam Sutton. So the Browns played well.
They did.
Like Mike Tomlin said, you do have to tip your cap to them. Jacoby Brissette was better than I expected. I know he was good in week 2. Didn't think he'd be able to be that sharp in week 3 against the Steelers defense. He was. So, you have to give them credit, and, we can still figure out where to lay the blame all around the Steelers, but I don't think it's really that much on Trubisky in this one.
And one thing I saw on the Terrell Edmonds, especially the second touchdown looked like it was a one-on-one thing. The first touchdown looked like a flat-out miscommunication because he's playing off Amari Cooper, and in the red zone, there's only so much ground to guard.
And Minka didn't get there in time.
And Minka doesn't get there. And as soon as the play's over, you see Terrell look like he puts his arms like, where was the help? And that, to me, when I saw that, I was like, that's like the first real miscommunication I've seen from the secondary in the first 3 games. Because even with the Ahkello Witherspoon touchdown that was given up to Nelson Aguilar in week 2, I mean, everyone's in position. Aguilar just made a really great play over Ahkello Witherspoon. This was the first time I was like, man, they were really out of position on this one. Either Edmonds should have maintained inside leverage or Minka should have come to help. Either way, there was a breakdown there. And that was where I was like, oh, man. Like, that's not normal. And then you saw that throughout the game. And I think that was a big part of Jacoby Brissette doing what he was supposed to do. There were miscommunications. He took advantage of it. The Browns, their secondary had a lot of miscommunications. And this is where I will push on Mr. Trubisky. There were times, even with some of his best throws, the throw that he threw to George Pickens with the one-handed catch that everyone's going to be talking about on SportsCenter for the next 3 months. That one play, Chase Claypool was doing jumping jacks in the middle part of the field. Like, I am so open, just hit me with it. And there were plenty of other moments in just the broadcast version that I watched on Amazon Prime. There were plenty of those moments that I was able to see live, and I'm like, man, that's familiar. And again, that's not putting it all on Mitch Trubisky, but it's acknowledging, like, hey, there are play calls where guys are getting to open parts of the field that the Steelers need to attack, and it's still not getting there. Jacoby Brissette, when that opportunity was there for the Browns, he was taking them more consistently. I think that's a big factor too. But like you said, the other team gets paid too, and I think the Browns, they just did a better job at executing those moments.
Yeah, I think it's also, you talk about the Steelers offense, where Mitch Trubisky's going with his reads and whatnot at this moment. It's challenging too when you have so many mouths to feed, right, Chris? I mean,
right.
We talked all week. They need to get George Pickens more involved. They do that, even when it's, to your point, maybe not the best read on a given play, but what we've been saying all week, just give the guy a chance. He does freakish things in practice. So I'm not going to pick that nit necessarily, but it's a game that Pat Freiermuth doesn't even get involved until the second half. So, I mean, I asked Mitch about that after the game. How do you balance trying to please everybody and distribute the ball? And he said, he's an experienced guy. He knows at this point that you just tell somebody, like, look, maybe you're not getting those targets early, but you'll be there late. And that is what happened with Freiermuth to a degree. So it is interesting, these past 2 weeks that they've lost, the Patriots pretty much zoned in on 2 guys. Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers did everything for him. The Browns were funneling everything to Njoku and Cooper. So it's nice to have all that wealth of playmakers, but sometimes that's a double-edged sword where, you're trying to please everybody, and, nobody is feeling all that great about it at the end. So, I mean, it's just they're still figuring it out for sure. And again, I opened the podcast with this. Most of the teams in this league are fairly evenly matched. Yeah. We always talk about the parity in the NFL. It's not a sexy thing to discuss, but unless you've got one of these mutants at quarterback, Josh Allen or Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes, you're going to be in a lot of games like this where it's probably a 50-50 proposition. Does Nelson Aguilar or Ahkello Witherspoon make the play? Does Terrell Edmonds or Amari Cooper make the play? And sometimes it goes your way and sometimes it doesn't. You hope that it evens out in your favor over the course of the season. But right now the Steelers are sitting at 1-2.
Yeah, they are sitting at 1-2. We'll talk about maybe some hope for them moving forward, things that we can look at on the positive aspect of the Steelers in just a minute. But first, we got to talk to you about Yinzers in the Berg. Yinzers in the Berg is the ultimate Pittsburgh sports apparel place that you need to get to. The Yinzers, listen up. This with the Steelers campaign off and running. You got to show your support for the black and gold, and it's easy with 2 legendary shops in the Strip District. They have that plus a growing online store, so you can go visit either of the locations, go check out the merchandise yourself, or sit from the comfort of your own home online and check out Yinzers in the Berg, the place to go for all your Pittsburgh sports apparel, accessories, and much, much more. They'll see you in the Strip District, or check them out online at yinzerspgh.com. That's yinzerspgh.com. For all your Pittsburgh sports apparel. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Brian Batko. Brian, things that you can look at moving forward. Now, before we get to that, 1 of 9 on third down is abysmal. Like that is, you can't, there's no way around that. But there were times that I looked at this offense and I was like, wait a second, is this real? Like, are they actually doing something like really good here? And, like Najee Harris, 56 yards and 15 carries on a great average, but you saw him getting busy a little bit. The offensive line only allowed 1 sack on Mitch Trubisky. Their pass protection through 3 games, in my opinion, has been a lot better than any of us expected of them. And I think
preseason was ugly, and there were people saying Dan Moore can't play in the NFL. Well, guess what? He's been fine through 3 weeks. So
he's been fine. I think Chukwuma Okorafor has played very well. To the point I heard that there were some people trying to scrap up in the press box.
That was let's talk about that. That was
I want to hear this.
Getting feisty. Yeah.
What happened? I heard that Richie Walsh was about to throw down with somebody.
Our guy Ray Fittipaldo was
what?
Chirping. Yeah, Ray, he's one of the most mild-mannered
I've never seen him raise his voice.
Stoic. He didn't raise his voice, but he was chirping. No, it was just funny, like not funny because Anthony Walker from the Browns, they're really good linebacker. He got banged up, carted off, and it was a heavy moment, of course, in the stadium and in the press box. As you know, I mean, sometimes there are team employees in there who do have a rooting interest, whereas us sports writers are rooting for the game to end as soon as possible, especially on a Thursday night. But sometimes people in there are, they're pulling for one team or the other. And when Chuks Okorafor kind of jumped off the top rope onto Anthony Walker to try to finish the play. Yeah, I mean, I asked Chuks about it after the game. He said he's just playing ball, and that's you're taught to cover a guy up, right?
Cover a guy when they're on the ground. That's
right.
That's
so that's what he did. Of course, Walker is down, and actually, when I go back and watch it, I think Walker hurt his knee even before that. I don't think Okorafor even did anything to injure him, but he's getting carted off. It's a scary moment. A couple people in the press box who probably had Browns regalia on are criticizing Chuks, calling it a dirty, dirty play. And I think Richie from KDKA, our pal, said it wasn't dirty. He was just playing to the whistle. In the Browns, don't know if I should call him an employee, staffer, fan. I honestly don't know who it was or what he did there, but he's like, "Oh, you've never played the game then," and so that was kind of he kind of went that road on it, right? So and he kind of kept saying, "Man, that's dirty. That is so dirty. Kick him out, whatever." And at one point, I think that's when our guy Ray, who was in front next to me, kind of says up to the back row, that's what you're taught to do or something like that. And he's like, well, then you never played the game then either. And Ray's just like, okay. Which, as we know, Ray was a college offensive lineman at Holy Cross. So swing and a miss by the peanut gallery on that one. But just a little bit of tension on these Thursday night games. Everybody's nervous about the drive home and writing on deadline and trying to get out of there. So things got thick.
That was I saw y'all tweeting about that, and I was like, wait, what? This is the road game I needed to be on. I was like, let me find out Ray Fittipaldo was swinging helmets on people.
No, I think it was just a simple case of objectivity, versus a little bit of bias, maybe. So little bit of emotions when the Browns side of things see a guy get injured. And certainly before you could really go back and watch the whole replay, you could argue that it was an unnecessary shot there by Chuks, but
not like egregious. It was just like, hey, you didn't need to do that. But live in the moment, I feel like that was my first thought. I was taught as an offensive lineman. My dad was a coach. You see your man on the ground, lay on him, like keep him down there. Then then your job is complete. So I'm with you on that. But back to, there are positive things about this team. Like, again, guys are open. The Najee Harris was running hard.
He's running angry.
He was running angry. There was some anger runs. That touchdown, I mean, he just throws Josh Johnson off of him while his face mask. I mean, the dude grabbed Harris's face mask and he stiff-armed him so hard that he had to let it go. It's just like,
not Josh Johnson, John Johnson.
John Johnson.
Josh Johnson is Najee's boy from the Bay Area, so we don't want to get that twisted. But
apologies.
John Johnson went flying. So, a man with 2 first names, that was not good for him.
It was not. But again, I look at I look at there's things there to build upon. This, like you were saying earlier, it's not as if everything didn't work in this game. Alex Highsmith had a sack and a half this game. Larry Ogunjobi got to the quarterback in this game. You know, there were good plays. Like Keller Witherspoon got completely toasted. There's no doubt about that. And there are questions as far as maybe
he's got a hammy now too. So
and that too, yeah. So like,
see what happens there.
And there are some real questions as far as do the Steelers should they have really went and got a number one corner to lead the cornerback room? But
is this when you call up Joe Hayden? You're like, are those papers filed or what? Like,
are you retired, or are you like retired?
Is that ink dry or what's going on, bro?
I mean, they could do something like that, but again, I see like again, there's plays away from on both sides of the ball from really good things happening. You know, there's if the offense puts up points, if the offense gives them more time, maybe the defense is able to make a couple more stops in the run. I thought Devin Bush actually looked good in this game. There were some plays in the hole. Kareem Hunt one-on-one, and Kareem Hunt is not an easy guy to bring down. One-on-one, Bush was stuffing him, and obviously, it didn't lead to them shutting down the run game, but individually for Devin Bush, I thought he looked. There are things that to build off of this game, even as they sit 1-2.
Yeah, Devin Bush had some moments. Miles Jack had some moments. Ogunjobi fell off after starting hot there against his former team. I do think that more often than not, most weeks, Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to make plays in the secondary. When TJ Watt gets back, you don't want to lean on that too much because who knows how long he's going to be out and what that recovery timetable is going to be. But when he does get back, he changes games. Alex Highsmith was much better after kind of disappearing a little bit there in week 2. And then, on the offensive side of the ball, you just have to figure George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Najee, Pat Freiermuth, they're all too talented to be held down this consistently. So, that does go into the game planning, play calling part of it, find a way to put those guys in advantageous positions. And that's what a lot of them were saying afterward. I don't think that there's this, I think for some, there's this perception that there's a revolution going on in the Steelers locker room and, and they're going at Matt Canada's neck and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's the case. This is just my take, my 2 cents on feeling the vibe of the room. Any losing locker room, you talk to the offensive players, guess what? The O-line wanted you to run it more. Yeah. The wide receivers wanted you to throw it more.
And they were open every play.
And the quarterback wanted you to make every catch. So, I mean, I think that a lot of these guys right now, they're dealing with the frustrations of not winning. We talked earlier in the show about how there's only so many targets to go around, and every pass catcher wants to produce, even though they say they only care about winning. They all want the stats too. But I just think that the safe thing that guys are trying to say is we need to make plays and we need to hope the coaches put us in position to make plays. I think they're actually being intentionally vague and broad and not trying to get the knives out because, like, there's a Deontay Johnson quote that I think is going around right now on Twitter that people are really running with. The very next question was a follow-up from our friend Brooke Pryor of ESPN asking, do you feel like they did put you in position to make plays tonight? And he said yes. So, you can believe him or not believe him if you want, but if you're just going by what players are saying in post-game interviews, I think it's a little bit unfair to try to push this narrative of, man, there's a mutiny going on right now because the Steelers have lost 2 games in a row and there's only been 3 games.
Exactly. And I say this because you and I have both been in the locker room. There are plenty of times that you hear a quote, we sit there hearing the tone of it, the context of it, and the full conversation that's going on with the scrum. There's times that you can take that quote, put it in text of a meme, slap it on Twitter and say, see, this is what they're saying. And it's like full context. That's not the tone that you're trying to address it with. But when someone rebrands it and makes it about the narrative that they want to push, that's what it's going to sound like. So I hear you on that entirely. And I think, again, back to the topic we opened with, I don't think that they need to press a panic button, nor do I think that the Steelers are pressing a panic button. And that's who they've always been. I mean, let's face it, last year they started the season 1-3. This is not new territory to them. Even if you go back, 2020 was different because they went on that crazy run, but they were 1-3 in 2019 as well. And they were, what was it? 1-2 2-1 in 2018. This is familiar territory. This is not, oh gosh. Now, what may be more daunting is that they don't exactly have the Broncos with whatever that quarterback, they Drew Lock at quarterback and Geno Smith with the
Jeff
Seahawks.
Driscoll.
Right. They don't have those guys to pick on in the next 2 games after this. They got the Jets with Joe Flacco and then that gauntlet of teams I mentioned earlier. And maybe that's, cause of concern. But again, as far as where the team is at right now, we knew that this offense was rebuilding a lot. We knew they were going to need to get their timing down, find their identity. And I think that there's times they're finding strengths, but it takes more than just 3 games to do that. And that's why you're not seeing a panic button just yet from the staff or these players.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not good enough. And,
right.
I thought you can find plenty of failures last night. I mean, Mike Tomlin, I didn't agree with a couple of his 4th down decisions that he kind of shrugged off after the game, as he usually does. Doesn't often explain a whole lot about what he's considering there. I think you could even argue sending Chris Boswell out there for the early field goal in that wind was questionable. The defensive plan, I mean, a week after putting more D linemen out there because you thought the Patriots were going to try to run it on you. Well, why didn't you try some of that last night against the Browns instead of leaving more Malik Reed out there to his own devices? So some things they could have done better. It does start at the top with Tomlin, and everything from there, the plan needs to be better to try to get victories. But I mean, at this point, it's still 3 games in. You're right. They've been here before. This is the Steelers we're talking about. They don't make a ton of knee-jerk decisions. That 2019 season with Mason and Duck was kind of a unique situation with Mike Tomlin getting a little bit jumpy there at quarterback. But this isn't Mason and Duck. And even Mason got a pretty long leash to start that season. People forget it. Things got a little crazy after that, but at this point, if you're looking for the spark that you got in Duck Hodges once upon a time, Kenny Pickett is not a spark. He's the future. So it's a whole different discourse to get into with that. So, I don't think that I don't know who has said this. I mean, somebody out there, one of the people who've written books about the Steelers say they think in the Rooney's thinking centuries or whatever instead of years. Mike Tomlin kind of does that too from a coaching perspective. One of my favorite phrases that someone out there has said about the Steelers is they're a large ship that turns slowly. I don't think they are, turning Pickett bound just yet. So if you're a Trubisky fan, that's good news for you. If you're not, don't know what to tell you, except it's going to be a long 10-day wait for you, I guess, until they face the Jets.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. I would be personally, again, I think I'd be okay with it if they at least tried it against the Jets. But I also get they're thinking, hey, if it also, Brian, we see it practice, but we don't know what's going on in the meeting rooms. We don't know if Kenny Pickett is actually, they might say, this guy is getting there, but we need to see, these other things from him in the week-to-week practice and what leads up to these games. So that they may have their reasons for waiting for that. We're going to see if they do, how long this wait goes. That's why the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is going to be there every single day, giving you coverage whenever there's availabilities. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions when the locker rooms open up after this game. The Steelers do have a long weekend. We'll have all the updates for you when they do open their locker room back up.
They're actually available today, Chris.
Oh, whoa! So it's not even. I thought they were at least going to make y'all go in on a Saturday, but that's nice. At least you guys get to enjoy Pitt, Rhode Island, and that 5-star matchup that'll be happening Saturday. So there you have it. Friday, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reporters will be back in the Steelers locker room. Do check out all their work at post-gazette.com at any point in time. Brian, thanks so much for doing this show with me. It's always great to have you on here. Let people know where they can follow you on social media and what other things you might have coming up.
Yeah, man. Brian Batko on Twitter, and we're right now nothing really planned. We're going to see what these guys say when we get down to UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. So these losing locker rooms is never a fun place to be. I think the cool down factor will take effect today, or I think some guys will, if people are in there and willing to talk, which you never know. But if they are, I think they'll be willing to lend a little bit more insight. They'll probably have seen some of the tape, and just the natural frustration might fade away a little bit. So we'll see what we hear from those guys, what we write today on the site. And in the meantime, I'm going to stay bundled up, maybe go get a pumpkin spice, or tonight crack open an Oktoberfest or pumpkin beer. So I'm ready for it.
There we go. He's Brian Batko. I'm Chris Carter. We're both of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Find this show, the North Shore Drive Podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our episodes here, not just on the North Shore Drive Podcast, but all of our live chats. There was Paul Zeiss and Adam Bittner after the game on Thursday night. You can get that all right here on our YouTube channel. Thanks again for checking out the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's North Shore Drive Podcast. Be back Monday with Ray Fittipaldo, getting you ready for Week 4 against the Jets.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive Podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.